The void of space was a cold and unforgiving expanse, but no region was as perilous as the nebula of Ashur. Here, stars flickered weakly behind swirling cosmic debris, and predators thrived in the emptiness. For Zillarith, the alien dragon queen, this treacherous expanse had become a battlefield, a fight for survival. Her once pristine scales, which reflected hues of green and gold like living jewels, were now torn and stained with blood. Massive gashes crisscrossed her body, glowing faintly as her energy began to dwindle. Her twin cubs, Firen and Maren, clung to her battered frame. Both were trembling, their chirps of distress a haunting echo in the silence of space. The Kraul marauders, relentless hunters of rare beings, were in pursuit. Their metallic ships, shaped like predatory insects, buzzed through the debris field, firing beams of concentrated energy. Zillarith had tried to evade them, using her immense wings to maneuver through the asteroids, but the ambush had been devastating. "Mother," chirped Firen weakly, his small wings struggling to keep balance against the turbulent winds of their flight. "Are we safe yet?" Zillarith glanced at her cubs through her peripheral vision, her heart heavy with despair. "Not yet, my son. But I will protect you. Always." A barrage of plasma fire exploded near her left wing, sending a shockwave through her body. Zillarith screamed in pain, her telepathic cry echoing in the minds of any creature sensitive enough to hear it. Her body gave out, and with her last reserves of strength, she dove toward a distant planet that glowed faintly with a bluish hue. She didn't know if it was safe, only that it was her last chance. The planet, Terra Nova 47, was shrouded in thick jungle canopies and alien mists. Zillarith crash-landed into its dense foliage, carving a deep trench through the ground. Trees splintered and toppled, and the forest seemed to hold its breath as the queen lay motionless, her body battered and her breath shallow. Firen and Maren crawled to her side, their tiny frames shaking as they nuzzled into her. "Mother," Maren whispered, her voice barely audible. "Please wake up." Zillarith stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She craned her neck to look at her surroundings, her antennae twitching as she scanned for danger. The air was thick with unfamiliar scents, and the jungle teemed with life, none of it threatening, yet. "We rest here," she murmured to her cubs telepathically. "But we must remain hidden. The Kraul will not stop until we are destroyed." Meanwhile, orbiting the planet, the humans aboard the Aurora's Edge were finishing their routine scans of Terra Nova 47. The Edge was a marvel of human ingenuity, a vessel built to explore and terraform distant planets in humanity's desperate search for a new home. Its crew had spent weeks studying the lush jungle world, preparing for an eventual descent. But that night, their mission changed. "Commander Vega," said Zane Helix, the ship's engineer, his voice crackling over the comms. "You'd better take a look at this." Commander Alara Vega stepped into the control room, her tall frame silhouetted by the glow of monitors. "What is it, Zane?" Zane gestured to the main display, where a heat map of the planet's surface flickered. A massive energy spike had registered in the atmosphere, followed by a loud crash in the northern quadrant. Whatever caused that, it wasn't natural. Some kind of entity, maybe? Dr. Elise Corbin leaned over the monitor, her eyes wide with curiosity. "That's not just any entity. Look at the residual energy signature, it's organic and bioluminescent. Something alive made that impact." Alara frowned, crossing her arms. "Alive? On this planet? We haven't detected anything that large before." "It could be dangerous," Kai Oren, the ship's enigmatic ex-soldier, said from the corner of the room. He spoke with a calm, measured voice that hinted at experience with such situations. "But it could also be an opportunity." Alara considered her options. As much as she hated deviations from protocol, the anomaly was too significant to ignore. "We need answers. Prep a shuttle. We're going down." Minutes later, the team descended through the thick atmosphere in their sleek, durable craft. The dense jungle came into view, a sea of green broken only by the charred trench left by Zillarith's crash. As they approached the site, Elise's voice crackled over the comms. There's definitely something big down there. Scans are picking up massive heat signatures, 3 of them. 3? Zane muttered, gripping the edge of his console. Fantastic. A whole family of space monsters. Focus, Alara snapped, piloting the shuttle with precision as they touched down near the trench. The airlock hissed open, and the team stepped into the thick jungle, their boots crunching against the damp underbrush. The air smelled of charred wood and ionized particles, a clear sign of a violent impact. When they reached the clearing, the sight took their breath away. There, lying in the crater, was Zillarith, her massive body glowing faintly in the moonlight. Her cubs, Firen and Marin, huddled against her side, their tiny forms shimmering like fireflies. The humans froze, their initial fear giving way to awe. What the hell is that? Zane whispered, clutching his laser rifle. It's huge. Elise stepped forward, her scanner beeping wildly as she aimed it at the queen. It's a dragon. Or something close to it. But look at her. She's wounded. Badly. Zillarith stirred at the sound of their voices, her amethyst eyes snapping open. A low growl rumbled from her throat as she raised her head weakly, her antennae quivering. The human stepped back, but Kai held his ground, meeting the queen's gaze with a calm intensity. She's scared, Elise said softly. And hurt. Kai took a slow step forward, lowering his weapon. We're not here to harm you, he said, his voice steady. We can help. Zillarith's gaze lingered on him, her glowing eyes narrowing as she reached into his mind with her telepathic abilities. She saw flashes of pain and lost memories of battles fought and lives lost. But she also saw his resolve and courage. I sense truth, her voice echoed faintly in Kai's mind. Help my cubs. Kai turned to the others. We've got a chance to do something incredible here. Let's not waste it. Reluctantly, Alara nodded. All right. Zane, prep the medbots. Elise, start gathering scans. We're not leaving her like this. As the humans began their work, Zillarith closed her eyes, her exhaustion overpowering her suspicion. For the first time since the attack, she allowed herself a glimmer of hope. The jungle of Terra Nova 47 hummed with alien life as the humans worked to stabilize the Dragon Queen and her cubs. Faint bioluminescent plants lit the area, casting an eerie green glow over the crater. The occasional rustle of distant creatures in the underbrush kept the team on edge, but their focus remained on the wounded Zillarith. Zane crouched near the Queen's massive flank, guiding a medbot as it sealed the deep gashes along her side with biopolymer gel. The faint hum of its applicator filled the tense silence. I'm no vet, but this is way beyond patchwork, he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. We're basically winging it here. She's tougher than she looks, Elise replied, her voice steady as she worked on Firen's broken wing. The cub whimpered softly, his glowing eyes fixed on her with a mixture of fear and curiosity. This little guy's wing is shattered, but he's holding on. Brave little thing. Firen chirped weakly, nudging her hand with his snout. Elise smiled. See? He knows we're helping. Kai stood a few meters away, keeping his rifle slung but ready. His eyes scanned the tree line, every muscle in his body tense. You're forgetting the bigger problem, he said, his voice low but firm. The Crawl aren't going to stop looking for her. This crash site might as well be a beacon. Alara stepped beside him, her arms crossed. I know. That's why we need to work fast. If they find us before she's strong enough to defend herself, we're all dead. Kai nodded, his gaze shifting to Zillarith. The Queen's breathing was slow but steady, her wound stabilized for the moment. Her antennae twitched as she stirred, her eyes flickering open. The humans froze as her gaze swept over them. You risk yourselves for me, Zillarith's voice resonated faintly in their minds, her telepathic tone both melodic and commanding. Why? Alara took a cautious step forward. Because it's the right thing to do. You're hurt, and so are your cubs. We couldn't just leave you here. Zillaritha's eyes narrowed, her antennae quivering. Many would see me as a threat. A prize. Yet you act differently. Kai stepped forward, his calm demeanor masking his unease. We've all lost someone. We know what it's like to fight to survive. And to be hunted. His voice softened as he met her gaze. You're not the only one running from something. The queen steadied him for a moment, then turned her attention to her cubs. Firen and Marin had stopped trembling, their small bodies now relaxed under the human's care. A faint glow of gratitude emanated from Zillaritha's chest, warming the cold air of the crater. You speak truth, she said. I will trust you, for now. Zane scoffed, glancing at Kai. Glad she's warming up to us, but what's the plan when the giant robot assassins show up? First, Alara interjected, cutting him off, we make sure she can move. Zane, I want you working on fortifying this area. Lay down some proximity mines and set up a few makeshift barriers. Elise, keep working on the cubs. Kai, you're with me. We'll scout the perimeter. The team broke into action, each of them acutely aware of the ticking clock. As they worked, Zillarith watched them with a mixture of curiosity and cautious admiration. Despite their frailty compared to her immense form, they moved with determination, their unity a stark contrast to the chaos she had endured with the crawl. Hours later. The night deepened, and the jungle grew quieter, save for the occasional hum of strange creatures echoing in the distance. Zane had constructed a rudimentary barricade using energy shields from their ship, while Kai and Alara patrolled the perimeter. Elise sat beside the cubs, running her hand gently over Marin's back as the young dragon purred softly in her sleep. She's remarkable, Elise murmured, glancing at Zillarith. The way she protects them. It's maternal, but also fierce. It's like she's more than just an alien. She's a mother. She's also a target, Kai replied, his voice carrying over the comms as he and Alara returned to the camp. And we just made ourselves targets by helping her. Alara sighed, her fatigue showing as she dropped to a seat near the barricade. You're not wrong. But we didn't come out here to hide. If we're not willing to help when it counts, what's the point of anything we're doing? Zillaritha's voice cut through their thoughts, her telepathic tone clear and sharp. Your bravery, it is rare. Yet your words carry pain. You have lost much. Kai stiffened, feeling her presence brushing against the edges of his mind. He met her gaze, his jaw tightening. We've all lost something. Zillarith tilted her massive head, her antennae swaying as she considered his words. Perhaps that is why you understand my plight. My kind has been hunted for millennia. The Krall seek not just my heartstone but the extinction of my lineage. My cubs are all that remain. Elisa's hand froze mid-stroke on Marin's back, her expression softening. All that remain? You're the last of your species? The queen's eyes glimmered faintly. Yes. And if I fall, the legacy of the dragon queens falls with me. A heavy silence fell over the camp. The gravity of Zillaritha's words weighed on the humans, each of them grappling with the implications. Alara broke the silence, her voice resolute. Then we don't let that happen. If the Krall come for you, they'll have to go through us first. Zane snorted. Great. So it's official. We're taking on alien cyborg assassins for a dragon mom and her kids. Just another day at the office. Quit complaining, Kai shot back, his voice tinged with dry humor. You love this kind of thing. As the humans prepared for the inevitable arrival of the Krall, Zillarith watched them with a newfound respect. These fragile creatures, bound by their shared pain and resilience, had become her unlikely allies. For the first time since the ambush, she felt a glimmer of hope not just for her survival but for the future of her cubs. The stars above continued their slow, eternal dance, oblivious to the brewing battle below. In the heart of the jungle, an uneasy alliance was forged, one that would be tested when the crawl finally arrived. The night on Terra Nova 47 grew darker, and the alien jungle seemed to hold its breath. The humans and the Dragon Queen prepared for the inevitable, their alliance tested by the looming threat of the crawl marauders. Zillerith lay at the heart of the makeshift camp, her body weak but her senses sharp. Her cubs, Firen and Marin, nestled close to her side, their small forms glowing faintly in the dim light. The tension was palpable as Alara finished double-checking the defenses. Zane was crouched behind a barricade, tinkering with an overloaded plasma turret he had scavenged from the Aurora's edge. "I swear, if this thing doesn't blow up in my face, I'll call it a win," he muttered. "Just make sure it actually works when we need it," Alara replied, her tone clipped. She turned to Kai and Elise, who were inspecting their surroundings. "Elise, keep the cubs out of harm's way. Kai, you're with me at the front line." "Understood," Elise said, nodding as she knelt by the cubs. Firen chirped softly, nuzzling against her hand. She smiled despite the tension, her heart aching at the thought of anything happening to them. Kai, rifle slung across his back, moved silently to Alara's side. "The jungle's too quiet," he said, his voice low. "It's like everything knows what's coming." Alara glanced at him, her eyes hard. "So do we. Stay sharp." Suddenly, Zillerith stirred, her antennae twitching violently. Her eyes snapped open, glowing fiercely. "They are here," she said, her telepathic voice resonating in their minds. The crawl. The ground began to tremble, a faint vibration that grew steadily stronger. The humans exchanged uneasy glances as the jungle canopy lit up with fiery streaks descending from the sky. The crawl ships pierced through the atmosphere, their metallic forms glinting in the moonlight as they landed with bone-rattling force. The air was thick with the hum of energy weapons and the shrill, mechanical shrieks of the crawl soldiers. The first wave the crawl emerged from their ships, their insectoid forms towering over the humans. Each one was a grotesque fusion of flesh and metal, with sharp claws, glowing red eyes, and plasma cannons mounted on their arms. They moved with calculated precision, their spindly legs clattering against the ground as they fanned out in formation. "They're locking onto the Queen," Zane shouted, ducking behind the barricade as a plasma blast scorched the ground nearby. "Hold the line," Alara barked, raising her rifle. "Focus fire on the front ranks." The humans sprang into action. Kai took position on higher ground, his steady aim picking off crawl soldiers with precision shots. Zane activated the plasma turret, its overloaded core spewing bolts of energy that tore through the enemy ranks. Elise, armed with a small sidearm, stayed close to the cubs, her body shielding them from harm. Zillerith let out a thunderous roar, her weakened form rising despite the pain. She lashed out with her tail, sending several crawl flying into the jungle. Her claws struck down another wave, but her movements were slower than before, her injuries hindering her strength. "They're too many," Zane shouted, sweat dripping down his face as he fired relentlessly. "We're getting overwhelmed." "Keep fighting," Alara yelled, gritting her teeth. "We have to buy her time." Desperation and unity as the humans fought valiantly, the crawl adapted. A second wave poured out of their ships, this time with heavier artillery. They unleashed a barrage of plasma fire that slammed into the barricades, shattering one of the energy shields. The humans scrambled for cover as explosions rocked the camp. Kai gritted his teeth, his rifle smoking as he took down another crawl. "We can't hold this position much longer," he shouted. Elise glanced at Zillerith, panic flickering in her eyes. The Queen was faltering, her energy nearly spent. Firen and Marin chirped in distress, their tiny bodies huddled against their mother. Zillerith raised her head, her voice resonating in their minds. "You have done enough. Flee while you can." Alara turned to her, her jaw set. "No. We're not leaving you." Suddenly, an idea sparked in Elise's mind. "Zillerith," she called. Can you use your energy to create a distraction? Something big enough to disorient them? The Queen's antennae twitched as she considered the plan. I can try, but it will drain what little strength I have left. It's our only chance, Alara said, nodding. Do it. The Queen's defiance. Zillarith closed her eyes, drawing on the remnants of her strength. Her chest began to glow brighter, the energy within her heartstone radiating outward. The ground trembled as a surge of bioluminescent light erupted from her body, spreading like a shockwave. The Kraul hesitated, their mechanical forms spasming as the energy disrupted their systems. Now! Alara shouted. Hit them with everything we've got. The humans seized the opportunity. Zane redirected the turret's fire, unleashing a hail of plasma that tore through the disoriented Kraul. Kai moved like a shadow, taking out enemies with brutal efficiency. Even Elise fired with renewed determination, her protective instincts fueling her courage. Zillaritha's roar shook the jungle as she summoned one final burst of energy, sweeping her claws through the remaining Kraul. Her cubs chirped in unison, their voices blending with their mother's defiant cry. As the last of the Kraul fell, the jungle grew still. Smoke rose from the battlefield, and the humans stood amidst the wreckage, their breaths ragged but triumphant. Aftermath. The camp was in ruins, but they had survived. Zillarith collapsed to the ground, her body trembling from exhaustion. Elise rushed to her side, placing a hand on the Queen's massive flank. You did it, Elise whispered, her voice trembling with relief. You saved us. Zillaritha's eyes flickered open, a faint glow of gratitude shining within them. No, she said, her telepathic voice soft but resolute. We saved each other. The humans gathered around her, their faces reflecting a mixture of exhaustion and awe. They knew the battle was far from over. The Kraul would return, stronger and more determined. But for now, they had won a small but crucial victory. As dawn broke over Terra Nova 47, the first rays of sunlight pierced through the jungle canopy, illuminating the battered camp. Zillarith and her cubs, though wounded, were alive. And with their newfound human allies, they had a chance to fight back against the Kraul and protect what remained of their kind. The first light of dawn filtered through the thick jungle canopy, illuminating the devastation left behind. The ground was scorched, the barricades barely standing, and the air hung heavy with the metallic stench of burned Kraul and the ozone tang of spent energy weapons. But amidst the wreckage, a fragile peace had settled. Zillarith lay at the center of the camp, her breathing shallow but steady. Her cubs, Firen and Marin, curled against her side, their luminous bodies reflecting the faint light of the rising sun. Despite her exhaustion, Zillarith held her head high, her amethyst eyes scanning her surroundings. The humans were sprawled around the camp, battered but alive. Zane leaned against the remnants of the plasma turret, muttering curses as he repaired the scorched barrel. Elise sat on a nearby rock, carefully tending to a deep cut on her arm, her face pale but resolute. Kai stood watch at the perimeter, his rifle at the ready, while Alara sifted through a supply crate, taking stock of their remaining resources. Is it over? Firen's telepathic voice echoed softly in their minds, his tone a mixture of curiosity and fear. For now, Zillarith replied, her voice soothing. But we must remain vigilant. The Kraul will not stop. A plan for the future. Alara approached the Queen, her expression a mixture of respect and determination. We can't stay here, she said, her voice firm. The Kraul know your location. They'll send reinforcements. Zillarith nodded slowly, her antennae twitching. You speak truth. But I am weak, and my cubs cannot yet fly. Where would we go? We have a ship, Elise said, stepping forward. The Aurora's Edge. It's not huge, but it's fast. We could take you to a safer place. Somewhere the Kraul won't find you. Zane scoffed from his corner. And how exactly are we supposed to fit a dragon the size of a house on our ship? Forget her cubs, just look at her. We'll make it work, Kai said firmly, cutting Zane off. We didn't come this far to leave them behind. Zillaritha's eyes narrowed as she considered the offer. To place yourselves in such danger again, why? Kai met her gaze, his voice calm but resolute. Because we've all lost too much already. You're fighting for your family. We understand that. And if we don't stand together, what's the point? The queen studied him for a long moment before bowing her head slightly. Very well. I will place my trust in you. Preparing for departure, the humans worked tirelessly to prepare for their escape. Zane retrofitted the Aurora's Edge to accommodate the massive queen and her cubs, converting the cargo bay into a makeshift habitat. Elise gathered samples of the surrounding flora, hoping to replicate the alien jungle's environment aboard the ship to keep Zillarith and her cubs comfortable. As they worked, Zillarith watched them with growing admiration. These small, fragile creatures had faced overwhelming odds and refused to abandon her. Their unity, their determination, and their courage were unlike anything she had encountered in her long life. Kai, taking a momentary break from guard duty, approached the queen. We'll need to lift off soon. Are you ready for this? Zillarith inclined her head. I have no choice. My survival, and that of my cubs, depends on your efforts. But tell me, Kai Oren, what drives you? You fight not just for me, but for something deeper. Kai hesitated, his gaze distant. I lost my family a long time ago, he said quietly. War took them. Ever since, I've been trying to make sure no one else has to feel that kind of loss. Guess that's why I'm here. The queen's gaze softened. You carry much pain. Yet you channel it into protecting others. That is a rare strength. Kai gave a small nod, his lips curling into the faintest of smiles. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just stubborn. The final battle. Just as the humans were finishing their preparations, the jungle erupted with noise. The distant hum of crawl ships filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. They're back. Zane shouted, sprinting toward the camp. And they've brought reinforcements. Alara cursed under her breath. We don't have time for this. Kai, get Zillarith and the cubs to the ship. Zane, cover the rear. Elise, stick with me. The crawl descended in force, their numbers triple what they had faced the night before. The humans and Zillarith fought valiantly, but it quickly became clear they were outmatched. Plasma fire rained down, and the jungle was engulfed in chaos. Zillarith, summoning the last reserves of her strength, unleashed a deafening roar. Her wings flared wide, and her heartstone glowed brightly, sending a shockwave of energy through the battlefield. The crawl staggered, their mechanical forms disrupted by the surge. Now! Alara shouted. Everyone to the ship! Kai guided Zillarith and her cubs toward the Aurora's Edge, their massive forms moving as quickly as their injuries allowed. Zane covered their retreat, lobbing grenades that sent the crawl scattering. Elise sprinted ahead, activating the ship's boarding ramp. The queen and her cubs squeezed into the cargo bay, their luminous bodies barely fitting within the retrofitted space. The humans scrambled aboard, the ramp closing behind them as the crawl closed in. Punch it, Zane! Alara shouted, gripping a handhold as the ship's engines roared to life. The Aurora's Edge shot into the sky, narrowly avoiding a volley of plasma fire. The jungle grew smaller and smaller beneath them until it disappeared entirely. A new beginning. In the silence that followed, the humans and Zillarith caught their breath. The queen lay curled in the cargo bay, her cubs nestled against her. Though she was weak, a sense of relief washed over her. You risked everything, she said, her telepathic voice resonating through the ship. You have my gratitude. And my loyalty. Alara stepped forward, her expression softening. We're not done yet. We'll find you a safe place, somewhere the crawl can't reach you. And after that? Elise asked quietly. What happens when the crawl come for us? Alara looked at her team, then at Zillarith. We fight. Together. Zillarith nodded, her eyes glowing faintly. Then together, we will survive. As the Aurora's edge disappeared into the vast expanse of space, the fragile alliance between humans and dragon grew stronger. Against the odds, they had forged a bond that would shape not just their futures, but perhaps the fate of the galaxy itself.